Alright, the future of GLP drugs like semaglutide and tirzepatide, and other ones coming to market soon like Orforglipron and Retatrutide. We just saw that Zepbound or tirzepatide was just FDA approved for obstructive sleep apnea, making it the first FDA approved drug for this condition. Again, I'd argue that these benefits can be extrapolated to other GLPs like semaglutide. Let's look at what else is in Eli Lilly's clinical development pipeline. You can scroll down and I'll tell you what's in regulatory review or phase 3 and 2 and 1. Right now we see Orforglipron. This is an oral GLP drug. It's in phase 3 clinical trials for obesity and diabetes. Currently, the only other oral GLP-1RA drug on the market is Rybelsus, and it's only indicated for diabetes. This is by Novo Nordisk. The results of a phase 2 clinical trial for Orforglipron was posted in the New England Journal of Medicine. At 26 weeks, we saw about a 10 to 12% body weight reduction. Up to 75% of patients had a greater than or equal to 10% body weight loss. Once this gets FDA approved, it's going to be the first oral GLP-1 drug indicated for obesity. This is nice because I do have a lot of patients that are scared to use the injectable formulation. Coming in hot, also in phase 3 trials, we see Retatrutide. This is going to be a big one. This is also known as triple G. It hits the GLP-1 receptor, the GIP receptor, and also the glucagon receptor. Once it gets approved, this is going to be the only drug on the market that hits all 3 receptors. It's being studied for diabetes, obesity, osteoarthritis, obstructive sleep apnea, and cardiovascular and renal outcomes. Let's look at their phase 2 clinical trial for obesity. We're seeing massive amounts of weight loss with this medication. At 24 weeks with its primary endpoint, we saw a mean weight reduction of about 17.5%. In a secondary endpoint at 48 weeks, we saw a mean body weight reduction of 24.2%. That's like a fourth of your body weight. No other drug on the market has results like this. I talked about in one of my other videos that 503A and 503B of the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act allows pharmacists to compound commercially available drug products when it's on back order. Or also if you add like certain vitamins to it, we could argue that it provides a clinically significant difference for that patient to like decrease emesis and nausea. This is perfectly legal and it's going to make a lot of drug companies upset. This is because they're undercutting them because they're offering it at like 200 something bucks instead of $1,200. You know I like a good deal. 503A compounding pharmacies must comply with State Board of Pharmacy regulations as well as USP guidelines. Hospital pharmacies also abide by USP guidelines. Compounded semaglutide is not complicated to make. Compounding pharmacies buy the API or active pharmaceutical ingredient, semaglutide, from FDA-registered manufacturers. And then licensed professionals mix the API with excipients under cleanroom conditions and filter it into sterile vials, and then send samples of the vials to third-party independent laboratories for testing. This is called sterile compounding, and we did this in our lab class in school. I'll also mention that pharmacists can get a board certification in order to become board-certified sterile compounding pharmacists. But yeah, let's go see what else I gotta yabber about. I love looking at drug pipelines. Not a GLP, but we have bimagrumab in phase 2 clinical trials. This is a monoclonal antibody. Binds to activin myostatin type 2 receptors. I actually don't know a lot about this one. Also not a GLP, but eloralintide is in phase 2 as well. This is a selective amylin receptor agonist. There's a drug similar to it on the market called pramlintide or Simlin. It's approved for type 1 and 2 diabetes. It's a synthetic amylin analog. It has a black box warning for insulin-induced severe hypoglycemia, particularly in type 1 diabetic patients. But it reduces gastric emptying time, reduces caloric intake via centrally mediated appetite suppression, and reduces postprandial glucagon secretion. There's another drug called mazdutide in phase 2 clinical trials. It's a dual GLP-1 and glucagon receptor agonist. Lilly's also studying tirzepatide for higher doses in diabetes and obesity, and then also for metabolic dysfunction-associated steatohepatitis, or MASH. It's the replacement term for non-alcoholic steatohepatitis, or NASH. I also mentioned Lilly has a bunch of other medications in phase 1 clinical trials. Alright, let's look at Novo Nordisk's research and development pipeline. This is the company that makes Ozempic and Wegovy. Right now we see that semaglutide was filed for approval in chronic kidney disease, or CKD. Their FLOW trial looked at patients with type 2 diabetes and CKD. Diabetes is a frequent cause of chronic kidney disease as well as kidney failure. The primary outcome was kidney disease events, a composite of the onset of kidney failure, at least 50% reduction in eGFR from baseline, or death from kidney-related or cardiovascular causes. We saw a 24% lower risk of primary outcome events with semaglutide. Kidney function declined more slowly with semaglutide. 20 people would need to be treated with semaglutide over a 3-year period to prevent one major kidney disease event. Some more medications that are in the drug pipeline for Novo Nordisk are oral semaglutide 25 and 50 milligrams for diabetes, as well as oral semaglutide for obesity. Novo Nordisk has Rybelsus on the market, but see, it only goes up to 14 milligrams orally, and it's only indicated for diabetes. We also see this drug called CagriSema for diabetes and obesity. As I'm recording this video, the phase 3 clinical trial for CagriSema CagriSema with obesity has just been completed. CagriSema is a mix of cagrilintide, which is a long-acting amylin analog, as well as semaglutide. We saw statistically significant and superior weight loss at week 68 with CagriSema versus placebo. The trial was interesting in that it allowed patients to modify their dosing throughout the trial. People treated with CagriSema achieved a superior weight loss of 22.7% after 68 weeks. In addition, 40.4% of patients who received CagriSema reached a weight loss of 25% or more after 68 weeks. It seems to be comparable to tirzepatide or Mounjaro and Zepbound. And I would expect the combination of cagrilintide and semaglutide to be more efficacious than them separately. We also see semaglutides in phase 3 clinical trials for MASH. We also see once weekly semaglutide at 7.2 milligrams for obesity. My, that's a big dose. We see with Wegovy, it only goes up to 2.4 milligrams. This was actually really interesting. I had no idea that semaglutide was in clinical trials for Alzheimer's. This is actually really surprising to me. I don't think it's the drug itself that might have some benefits, but likely the weight loss associated with it. Definitely something on my radar now. There's some interesting things in some phase 2 trials too. It looks like they're working on their own GLP-GIP mix for diabetes and obesity. It's similar to tirzepatide that Lilly already has. I can't find the name of the drug though. Not a GLP, but let's look at this drug. This is interesting, monlunabant. It's also up here for diabetic kidney disease. It has an interesting little structure. There's a trifluoromethyl over here. Another drug that has this group is trifluridine. It's an antiviral. It comes as an ophthalmic eye drop. There's a lot going on in here. We see some guanidine groups. Some other drugs have the same group. It reminds me of metformin. Anyway, I guess this is a cannabinoid receptor 1 inverse agonist. There are no drugs in the market like this. When I first saw the drug class, I was like, oh, I don't know if this is a good idea. That's just for me personally, because like when I think of medications that act on the cannabinoid receptors, I think those are good, but this does like the opposite activity. Although it's perfectly selective, it looks like it has some neuropsychiatric side effects, like anxiety, irritability, and sleep disturbances. That's never good. But hey, it had a little bit of weight loss. This is shown in their 2A clinical trial, and this is more like preliminary data. I'm wondering if they're going to continue with this medication, like with a 2B or something. I don't know. I don't see this one going that far, but something to like, I don't know, keep my eye on.